Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point, AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. The program is Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio. The network is AFR Talk, the American Family Radio Talk Network. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if there's ever time to burn up the phone lines to Washington, D.C., today would be the day, because the U.S. Senate is planning to have what's called a cloture vote tonight at 5:30, which means the debate is over. No more debate on this 1,200-page monstrosity of an amnesty bill. This is the Marco Rubio Permanent Democratic Majority Amnesty Bill. And if they get the votes for cloture tonight, there will be no more debate on this bill in the Senate. Debate is over. Amendments are over. Reconsideration is over. And they're going to go straight to a vote on the bill itself, which all it requires, if they get this cloture vote tonight, all that they need is a majority then for this to be passed through the Senate and then be kicked over to the House. Now, I've got a story in the stack here about this evangelical immigration table. This is a group of evangelicals. The money behind them is from George Soros. This guy is a Marxist. He is a socialist, self-admitted. He has no love for this country. In fact, if anything, he's got a desire to undermine this country, to sabotage it, to weaken it from within. It's his money that is behind the evangelical immigration table. He's the one that's funding their billboards and their ads and everything that they're doing. And they're having these prayer sessions now. And these are my brothers in the faith. I want to be understand. I have a lot of affection. I've got a lot of admiration for these men. So this is a disagreement within the camp. This is an intramural debate, but I have a huge disagreement with them over immigration because I think they're just being fooled. I think they're being played for fools. I think they've been deceived, perhaps self-deceived on the implications of what happens with this amnesty bill. But they're taking George Soros money and they're out there pushing amnesty on the American people in the name of Jesus. They're having these prayer rallies, these prayer circles outside Capitol Hill and other places in D.C. to try to put some pressure on legislators, and they claim to speak in the name of evangelicals. They claim that they're speaking on behalf of the evangelical community. Well, ladies and gentlemen, they are not speaking for me, and I do not think they are speaking for you. And they essentially are trying to deceive legislators and the public by creating the impression that the evangelical community is of one mind and one heart on this deal. Well, they're not. And this evangelical immigration table, there are a number of evangelical leaders like Eric Metaxas, for instance, who says, look, I got kind of sold a bill of goods here. When this was presented to me, it was presented to me as simply a statement of principles. I did not realize that signing this statement of principles was going to obligate me to support this amnesty bill. Now, he didn't call it the Marco Rubio Permanent Democratic Majority Amnesty Bill. That's what I'm calling it because, in truth, that's what it is. But he said, look, I had no idea I was signing on to commit to support a specific piece of legislation. But that's what the evangelical immigration table is out there doing. They're all about the Marco Rubio Permanent Democratic Majority Amnesty Bill. And Eric Metaxas says, look, I want my name off that letter. I'm not a part of this coalition anymore. I was sold a bill of goods. They weren't shooting straight with me. I didn't realize they were going to use me to ramrod a particular piece of legislation. And I don't exactly know where he stands on the legislation itself, but I got to assume that he's got some problems with it, or he wouldn't have any reason to pull out of the coalition. And the implication is that there are other evangelical leaders that likewise are going to pull their names off of this deal. Now, this raises the question, and I've got a column about this. I did tweet that out, as a matter of fact. Got a column up at rightlyconcerned.com. It's at onenewsnow.com on our perspectives page. It's on the rotator. You'll see it on the rotating banner there. And the title of my piece today is What Jesus Would Say to an Illegal Alien. Now, I think that's a good question to ask. If Jesus had an illegal alien standing in front of him, or a representative, a chosen representative, an ambassador of Jesus Christ, who was taught and instructed by Jesus himself, if that representative of Jesus Christ had an illegal alien standing in front of him, what would Jesus say to that illegal alien? Or what would he want his representative, like the evangelical immigration table, to say to him? And so the question is, do we have any example in the New Testament of what that answer might be? And I believe that we do. And now remember, the evangelical immigration table, they said, look, if you don't have compassion as we define compassion, then you might be one of the goats of Matthew 25. And remember, Jesus said in Matthew 25, he's going to separate the sheep from the goats. If you did not do it to the one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. If you did it for one of the least of these, you did it to me. And on that basis, he's going to separate the sheep from the goats. And the goats are going to be headed into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. And the implication of this evangelical immigration table, unless you agree with us, unless you support the Marco Rubio permanent Democratic majority amnesty bill, you may be one of those goats that's headed into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. And they have, I think, the temerity and the effrontery to claim to be speaking for the entire evangelical community. Now, as I've said before, I think this position on the part of the evangelical immigration table turns biblical theology, turns Christian values, a Christian worldview on its head because it grants a huge reward, a guaranteed path to American citizenship. That is a huge reward. That is a monster reward. You've got 4 million people, ladies and gentlemen, including friends of mine, 4 million people waiting in their home countries, longing for the opportunity to have legal residency in the United States of America and a guaranteed path to citizenship. This is an incredible reward. It is a precious reward, almost beyond ability to put a price tag. And these illegal aliens are going to be granted this for free in part because of the work of this evangelical immigration table. Rewarding lawbreaking is not an evangelical value. So I think if we go to the New Testament, can we find an example that helps us think through what Jesus would say to an illegal alien? And I think there is. It comes from the New Testament book of Philemon. Now, to set the story, there was a young man by the name of Onesimus. His name means useful or profitable in Latin. And Onesimus found Paul in Rome. Rome is in prison in Rome. Onesimus came from Colossae, which is in Turkey. So he's running away from his master Philemon, running away from home. Paul was in prison. Onesimus finds him. Paul's in prison for preaching about Christ. And through the influence of Paul, Onesimus became a Christ follower. So now you've got Paul, who is an apostle of Jesus Christ. Now you have Onesimus, who is a brand new follower of Jesus Christ. Now here's the sticky part. Onesimus had no legal right to be in Rome. In essence, he was an undocumented immigrant. He was an illegal alien because he had no legal right to be in the city of Rome. He'd run away from his master, a man by the name of Philemon, who was living in Colossae, and under Roman law, he had a legal obligation to go back to Colossae. That's legally where he belonged. And we can have a discussion another day about slavery and all that. It was Christianity and Christians that abolished slavery, brought the practice to an end. But that's a story for another day. That was the lay of the land in the empire of Rome. So here's the challenge that the Apostle Paul has. He's got an illegal alien standing in front of him, looking to him for counsel. Onesimus says, what should I do? What is my moral obligation now as a follower of Jesus Christ? And Paul's counsel was very clear, and it was very direct. He says, Onesimus, your moral responsibility is to obey the law and to return home. In other words, what Paul said to Onesimus, you have a duty before God to self-repatriate, to self-deport, to use Mitt Romney's term. Now, remember, slave owners at that time had the power of life and death over runaway slaves, so there's risk involved in this for Onesimus, just as there may be unpleasant consequences for illegal aliens who make a decision to return to their native land. And Paul appeals to Philemon, look, when he comes back, Philemon could have put him to death for being a runaway slave, and Paul appeals to him, look, when he comes back, I'm sending him back to you. He has no legal right to be here. The place where legally he belongs is back in Colossae with you. But I'm asking you, Philemon, my brother in the faith, to receive him back, quote, no longer as a slave, but more than a slave, as a beloved brother. So be kind to him when he comes back. There's sort of a subtle appeal probably to Philemon to emancipate Onesimus. Paul says, look, I'll make good. Apparently he stole some stuff when he left. Paul says, look, Charge it to my account, whatever he owes you, I am going to make good on that. But clearly, Onesimus was not to stay where he had no legal right to be. He was to return. Here's what the apostle said: I am sending him back to you, sending my very heart. He refers to Onesimus as my very heart. In other words, he was attached to Onesimus. He developed a kind of love for Onesimus that a father has for his son. In fact, he had become a father to him in the faith. So Paul's counsel here to Onesimus is not motivated by a lack of compassion. He wasn't angry. There wasn't some kind of nativist energy that was driving him. In fact, he was motivated by compassion. It was his compassion for Onesimus. Here's what I want you to get. It was his compassion for Onesimus that prompted him to urge Onesimus, this illegal alien, to return to his homeland. So compassion for others always includes appealing to them to do the right thing. And the right thing was for Onesimus to go back. He had no right to be where he was in genuine compassion, not the soft, empty, fake pseudo-compassion that passes for charity these days, directed Onesimus to act with maturity and strength. Here's how historian William Barclay put it: Christianity is not out to help a man to escape his past and to run away from it. It is out to enable a man to face his past and to rise above it. Onesimus had run away. Well then, he must not be allowed to evade the consequences of his misdeeds. He must go back, and he must face up to the consequences of what he did, and then he must accept the consequences and must rise above them. Christianity is never escape. Christianity is always conquest. So, what would Jesus say to an undocumented immigrant? He would say, return home, obey the law, leave the place where you have no legal right to be, and return to the place where you do. So what should the evangelical immigration table be saying? Instead of trying to guilt trip the rest of the evangelical community into agreeing with them, the evangelical immigration table, I believe, should imitate the example of the apostle. They should say to illegal aliens, we are sending you back because the compassion of Christ compels us to. You're listening to Focal Point, AFR Talk. We'll be right back after these brief messages. Stay with us.